Hi, this is Greg from Interview Insights. In this video, I interview Jen Helmbolt, who has extensive experience with communication awareness and Makaton. So Jen, here's my first question for you. Can you give an example of the impact on a student who uses Makaton or other communication methods?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of Makaton as a whole programme, the language programme that it is, it can support in many different ways, and it really assists so many different walks of life as well. So it's not just saved for using with children who have diagnosed needs. So it can absolutely help with elements of mental health, for example, which is obviously very crucial with the situation that we're obviously facing at the moment, in that it can give another means of expression. It also brings in lots of knowledge in terms of reading a child's cues, or reading an adult's cues, reading just a human being's cues, in terms of how they're feeling. So that might be just simply through a body gesture or a facial expression, for example, that is a cry for help, or that they're not coping, for example. Specifically, I think tied to ASN, then it obviously gives those that don't have a natural voice, that aren't verbal, to have that voice, and to be able to express their needs, their wants, their desires, their thoughts, their feelings. And ultimately, just that basic human right can absolutely be given from it. In terms of some of the difficulties that those with specific diagnosed suffer from, for example, might be quite violent outbursts or products of anger that are the sort of output that you see. And all of these are some form of communication, obviously, on some sort of level. And Makaton massively reduces that. In that, obviously, it gives them an outlet to express themselves more positively, to make themselves more easily understood, to put across what they want to share, and just have that natural, independent life skill of being able to communicate with whoever they wish to do so. So specifically, I would say the biggest impact that I've seen personally in my use over the last sort of 15, 16 years, I guess, would be the beautiful reduction of, those outlying behaviour issues, as well as boosting things such as just natural confidence, or the element of respect, or the idea of being able to take turns, and all of these life skills, they're just essential for that independent life as best as possible that we can assist with.
That's great, thank you. And I think you've answered part of my next question as well, because sorry. I was going to ask you, how would you convince a mainstream school to utilise Makaton? Because part of the question I was going to ask was, can you see benefits in children that don't have physical or learning impairments? But you've pretty much answered that part of the question already.
100%. So,
but how would you convince a mainstream school?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the sort of, I guess, not sad thing, but more and more, I would say, in terms of mainstream, it is being much widely recognised that the children coming up now do struggle. And it might not be that they have a specific diagnosed need. It might be undiagnosed still. It might be going through the process of diagnosis, or it could just simply be a global delay. It could just be that slight reluctance, the nervous, the anxious, all of these sort of elements contributing to that sort of communication barrier. And Makaton, at the end of the day, is simply a communication tool. It's a communication programme, and it's there to assist with no matter who requires that support and scaffolding to boost the confidence. And whether that's a child who is very verbal, or a child or a learner who has no verbal whatsoever, it can have the same outcome for all sort of things. So it also fits in beautifully just now in terms of the mainstream early years and mainstream primary further education, etc. as well, in that there's lots going on just now in the buzzwords in terms of a communication friendly environment, isn't there? And that sort of inclusivity as well. So Makaton just fits straight in there on all sorts of curricular aspects. It ties in beautifully to your curriculum for excellence, obviously, our sort of country's guidelines, and our linked to progression on that framework there of the milestones as well. So to be honest, it doesn't take much persuasion for them to see the value, and the feedback is that it very quickly is absolutely embedded within, and it's not something that's seen as additional work. It's seen as something that's really interactive, really entertaining. It holds the kids' interest, and it almost makes them instantly more open to initiating conversation or sharing a bit more than they normally would in a sort of larger group situation. My boys' schools, for example, have taken it on board now, and they have Makaton Mondays. They have Makaton sharing in their school assemblies. Their Christmas show is going to be all entirely Makaton signed, along with all their songs and all their performance. And they're just thriving, absolutely thriving on it, which is just such a delight to see.
And I think there's lots of examples in other aspects of society where they've actually changed something initially just to help people with disabilities, and they found that everybody's benefited from it in some respects.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole sort of community aspect, making it much more accessible, is a massive step. And since Makaton was created back in the 70s, early 70s there, the sort of shift to make it really sort of user-friendly and community-friendly and accessible is huge. And it ultimately opens up that wider signing circle, if you like, that the individuals who need it for communication purposes have at their fingertips then. So, for example, ASDA has Makaton-friendly shopping boards that you can request. And something as simple that we take for granted as nipping in for a pint of milk or a loaf of bread, it's second nature to us. But for someone with processing difficulties, mental health issues, completely non-verbal, for example, you've got a busy environment, loads of people, lighting, different smells, all these sensory, olfactory, and really all they want to do is get a pint of milk. So by having that availability there of something as simple as a Makaton-friendly shopping board that they can request, instantly relieves all of those pressures and makes something as simple as that, as simple as it should be, and as easily accessible. I mean, even things like frontline doctors and nurses now are really pushing for training just to simply say, hi, I'm such and such, this is Dr. such and such. Do you know what? It's a wee bit scary, but everything will be all right. And that alone takes away the pressure and the trauma that some of the children that we work with have to go through on a very regular basis for hospital appointments, etc. But on top of the benefit for the child, it obviously massively benefits the family in a positive way as well, because it's traumatic for them to see their babies going through this and not fully understanding, what it is they're going through. And it doesn't take much on our part to learn those simple few little basic concepts, but it makes a world of difference to those that receive it.
That's great. And it's great since Makaton started, you say back in the 1970s, that there's been a much greater public awareness and recognition of the benefits that it brings to everybody. So that's nice that we are making improvements as we go gradually.
Absolutely. And, the market that it's being put out to and seeing wonderful research to back up the evidence as well that's sort of there. It's just huge, and it's come on leaps and bounds since the 70s, when obviously the wonderful Margaret Walker created the programme. And we're now going into aspects of healthcare, so it's being used with dementia sufferers, for example. It's been used for post-aphasia, stroke victims, that kind of idea. And the other avenue that it's really, really, especially in the last 10 years, been developed in is the use of supporting ESOL as well, and the bridge between that mother tongue and learning English. The Makaton seems to just snap it in there, and it's astounding from even 1.5, 2 years old that these children are now fluent in their mother tongue and in sign and in English, and it's just incredible, absolutely incredible. That's
brilliant. Some really encouraging signs there. Then
it's lovely to see just how much it is sort of growing its little legs and branching out there. And of course we've got your celebrities now reading big time stories in Makaton. We've got all your popular Saturday night TV Strictly Come Dancing competitors are now thanking people for votes using Makaton, and it just makes everything so much more inclusive for people who thoroughly enjoy Strictly Come Dancing, for example. But yeah, it's just in there, and it's being fed out as more of the norm now as well. You know, there'll be the little signing hour on CBeebies, for example, or you know, Mr. Tumble, something special. There's just so many ambassadors out there for the charity as well. Obviously, you've got Singing Hands in there that just the ladies do astounding work, absolutely astounding work, putting on big theatre productions and shows and keeping it going through lockdown. Everyone's done their own little bit, and just, you know, really pulling together and making an absolute difference to so many people.
That's brilliant. That's really great to see. I'll move on to my next question now, Jen. So what would you say to a teacher who is tempted to learn Makaton, who wants to use it within their setting, but maybe they're put off perhaps by the time or the effort that's going to be involved?
Do it. Simple as that. There almost isn't a negative to this. I am also an ASN teacher, as I've said, as well as being a freelance Makaton trainer. And I have sat through in service days where you have been spoken at for 4 hours solid, and you know, within half an hour, you've lost interest. You've drawn, I don't know how many doodles all over your notebook. Any teacher that, you know, has been doing it as long as I have will fully understand where I'm coming from. And, you know, that it's wasted time, it's wasted energy, it's wasted expense when especially budgets are tight. We have so much on our plates as teachers that we don't have valuable time to waste like that. So in terms of Makaton, especially within my own personal service, I pride myself on being the absolute opposite of that. So it's super interactive. It flies past. So each level is delivered over 2 4-hour sessions, for example, at the moment online. And the 4 hours go like that. You won't believe how quickly it goes, how much you take in, the confidence you get from it. And instantly, after that one first half session, you can hit the ground running and you can take it and you can use it. It's not something that you have to go and make a million resources for. It's not something you have to go back and ask budget for spending for manuals for. And it's exhilarating. It absolutely is. I mean, I'm positively passionate about what I do because I thoroughly love it. It's addictive. It honestly is. It's an absolutely delightful bug to catch. And yeah, I've yet to meet a single person who hasn't come on and said, wow. And the feedback that I get right across the board is just fantastic. I had my eldest trainer on this week who was 74 in her ripe young age. And my goodness, she was a force, just absolutely delightful to work with. And she's already signed up for her second level. So yeah, from a teaching point of view, whether you're mainstream or whether you're ASN, I cannot recommend this training as being valuable for you personally in terms of your lifestyle development, but also for every single child that you'll face with.
How can educators embed more Makaton within school to make classrooms more inclusive?
Really, really easily, again, and that's the absolute delight. Makaton is such a flexible learning program. It can be worked in with any system that's already in place, whether that's text, whether that's objects of reference, you know, whether that's the teach system that you're using. Because of its flexible nature and because you personalize it down to every individual that uses it, you can incorporate it and embed it so simply, so quickly. And it might be, for example, sign of the week. It may be popping that on your Twitter feed, so you've got your homeschool links as well, so that it's been done in the homes with families as well as in the school setting. It may be that you have the Share Song Assembly. It might be that you could sign up your rules, your rights respecting values, your visions for the school. You can obviously symbolise as well, which is a big part of Makaton, so it's not just the signing part, it obviously has the symbols as well. And they're another wonderful representation of the visual language to get that across. And, you know, symbolise up your school, have it available, have it widely acknowledged. You can also incorporate things like Makaton friendly status within your establishment as well. And that's something that I can absolutely assist with and supporting and scaffolding you through that. And that also gives you access to the wonderful online hub, which has just been released as well. And it's available to all. There's actually a 7-day free trial to anyone in the public who wish to hop on and have a look just now. You 100% can, so that's just makaton.org. And there are loads of signs and symbols on there, wonderful resources on there that you can download straight away and use within your establishment. The list is endless. You could tie it into sensory elements, it can tie in with your numeracy aspects. It's an absolute umbrella overview where you can put it into any sort of communication that you're doing.
That sounds great. Now, you've mentioned makaton.org as a point of reference where people might go to find out more. Maybe at the end of the interview, once it's all finished recording, I could ask for other maybe books that you'd recommend or online courses or anything else, and I can maybe post this on the video just now as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to share the courses that are available. That's not a problem, and I can obviously direct you to through my own page, as well as then you've got the main charity one there, which has the direct hub access. But yeah, there's such a wide variety of courses available as well, which is just really nice that it can touch sort of every business applicable, basically. It doesn't have to just be education. It can be care homes, for example, or it could be frontline supermarket staff, or it's literally that simple that it can apply and should be used by everybody.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jim. So my next question for you is, where do you start with a child who tries to speak but you can't understand?
Sure. So I think an initial assessment would have to be done in terms of how are they trying to communicate. That can be done through various observations when the child is naturally at play, for example, or in their most settled state throughout a session. Maybe that might be in the light and sound room, for example, or out with ASN specifically. That could be out in the playground, for example, in a mainstream, or watching how they interact with their best friend, for example. And then noting down, is it a sensory exploration that they're looking for, and then tie it into that, and that could be an accessing. The use of intensive interaction is obviously really, really high profile in supporting children who have additional support needs there, whether that's severe and complex or whether that's very mild and moderate. Definitely analysing that first and doing that over quite a decent amount of time, as well as over varied situations as well, just to see whether there's certain pressure points for that child. And then I think from there, it's slowly integrating what they're trying to feed. And that is the absolute utmost thing that you must remember, is that it's personalised and it's from the child. So it's what are they trying to communicate, and you have to try and kind of work that out. It's a little bit of sort of detective work, I guess, on your part, sometimes a little bit of guesswork, and just trying to integrate it in a routine as it becomes normal. So that might be a welcome song, for example, a hello song, a goodbye song, it might be a days of the week song. So starting to get terminology that you're using on a very regular basis, and then starting to in a little bit of sign that ties to that. Also ensuring that you've got consistency across your staff is just, I can't explain how important that is. It has to be across the board, it has to be with all staff on board, and you have to be so accurate in your signing every time, so that they're picking it up accurately. And that is why, as a tutor, and as my fellow tutors would also recommend, it's great that people are out there spreading Makaton, sharing the joy that Makaton is. But if you want to learn sort of 100% and make sure it's accurate, then the only route to go down is the official training. Because unfortunately, over and above, obviously, your sign sharing with colleagues, etc., that's fantastic. It sometimes ends up like Chinese whispers, shall we say. So it's shared once, it's shared again, it's shared a little bit differently and a little bit differently again. And before you know it, sort of 5 people shared down the line, the sign doesn't represent anything whatsoever as it originally intended to. And the communication value is then therefore lost. So yeah, I think that's massively important, but the starting blocks is definitely working from the child. The child should be at the heart of everything. and it's what are they putting out in terms of their needs and their expressed interests and their views, and that's what should feed your communication to support.
Have you come across any children in the field who have been particularly challenging to support, where maybe normal methods haven't worked? And if that's the case, how have you supported them?
I'm going to say no. Yes, there have been some more difficult than others, 100% there are. And it may be that age has something to do with it, maturity has something to do with it. Obviously, the complex, diverse needs that they have has something to do with it as well. However, I think in some cases, if the child hasn't been supported correctly for a good while, then they've gone quite a long time in dealing with their emotions and their pent up anxiety, etc., and sort of sharing that in the only way that they know how, which tends to be looked at, of course, in these sort of large outbursts of some sort of anger, or the red mist descends, as we see. And unfortunately, I absolutely have had situations where, there's been self-harming for a child, there's been property damage, for example, and these ones are really, really, really difficult to work with. I think for that situation, it's that intensive interaction that really is key, and it should be short, snappy, little bits, and then slowly, brick by brick, laying the foundation work. It won't be a quick solve, next day sorted problem. 100%, it won't be that. But if you personalise from day one, you'll get that child. And if you've looked at that child and analysed that child and worked out what that child's passionate about, what they really enjoy, when they're most settled, and got a real sort of round approach feel for that child, then you'll know how to access their interests or find that common ground, and just harness that, hold on to that, and slowly snip it in little bits. And what you find is, even if a child doesn't sign back instantly, you should always stick with yours regardless. And it tends to be all of a sudden there's a little synapse that clicks on, and you'll get one or two little signs back, and you'll think, whoa, it's coming. Then it's like a floodgates, and you think they've actually been taking that in the whole time that you've been feeding it to them. They've been processing it, they've been stashing it away, until they've felt the point where, yeah, I'm solid in this, I'm confident in it, and I'm ready to share it. And my goodness, when it flows, and it's the warmest fuzzy that will just stick with you for life.
So if you can encourage educators to use Makaton as early on as possible, you can save all the challenges and the problems that will emerge later as a result. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm by no means saying that Makaton is the only method that's going to be successful. 100% not. My entire sort of passion is sensory awareness, if you like, through communication. So there's many other methods, again, that you can combine along with Makaton. So Makaton is just one that I personally see massive value in across the board and across various demographic of spectrum of diagnosed needs, as well as undiagnosed. However, there are absolutely wonderful things such as story massage that plays a wonderful role, the use of resonance board work, sensory story work, the use of, for example, all your AAC, and your interactive boards. Of course, the technology is just endlessly developing, and it has its place. 100% it has its place. I always just fully encourage that you have a non-technology base and then back it up, because at the end of the day, we all know technology fails, doesn't it? Or the screen gets broken, or the charger wasn't switched on at the wall, and then if that's the only thing that child has to rely on, you've knocked them straight back to square one. So yeah, 100%. There's many, very many valuable methods when done right, that can absolutely assist. But I definitely think get in there young. It does them no harm whatsoever. And if you do get them young, they're like sponges. It's incredible what they take in at that age. And there isn't actually too young, because we obviously have the Makaton Signing for Babies program. So you can do that right from day one. 100%. That you can do that from day one.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jen. And do you think communication is the most important foundational skill as we grow?
100%. Without communication, we don't develop, because without conversation, without interaction, then how do we grow? How do we learn? How do we progress? How do we take on new knowledge if we're in isolation? And even just down to your sort of natural basic instinct. Yes, you might like a bit of quiet time, you might like a wee bit of alone time, of course, we all do, but ultimately we as human beings crave feedback. We crave another person, we crave companionship, we seek that out. And whether, you know, the levels obviously differ in terms of the understanding of that, the need for that, the volume of what's required to sort of keep you going and feed that. Of course, that differs for everyone and has to be personalised down.
Great, thank you very much. And can you give an example of how you might develop and adapt a daily lesson plan for a person with special needs?
Yeah, so I've got the list is endless that you could pick, really, isn't it? I think maybe, for example, a literacy session, if you were doing some reading, for example, or if you were doing a sensory story to accommodate your literacy aspect there, then possibly if you had your sensory story, which should be your sort of 10-line basis, it should be delivered identically every single day for a minimum of 4-week period, so that the children start to develop the idea of anticipation, of sequencing skills, of what's coming next, all that kind of idea. Of course, as well, all your book conventions and things, and you can tailor that down to the individual in terms of giving the child the role. They should be the lead. They shouldn't just be the participant or the audience member that sits and listens to the teacher feed it or the support staff feed it. It should absolutely be them leading the session. So give them the control. And it's how can I scaffold that to allow them to take control. And it may be that, you know, a certain child has a certain skill they're able to do better than others, then give them that, and the rest of the group experiences that through one of their own pupils within their class. Okay, so it's on their level instead of being always adult fed. Ensuring that every child has a role to play is really valuable as well. Tying to their personal experience and their life experience is crucial so that they can get a meaning and a context. It might be that you introduce your objects of reference, so you can have your real concrete material, you can have it on a photographic level, or you can have that on a symbolised level to differentiate there as well. So not only is the sort of AAC you're using differentiated to suit the needs of the pupil, you're also differentiating the activity, the pace of the activity or the length of the activity can be differentiated. And the follow-up activities are endless that you can do and differentiate down as well. And there's some wonderful topics and things, obviously, that you can cover. For example, it might be traditional tales, it could be healthy lifestyles, it could be the element of your STEM and delivered through toys. So you look at forces, for example, tied into the curriculum. The list is literally endless. In terms of AAC, yeah, it might be that it's you know your aided AAC, in which case looking at Big Mac switches, or is it eye gaze units that you're using, or is it interactive boards that you're using, or GoPros, or is it VOCAs, synthesizers? Just that, you know, there's absolutely loads to support there. In terms of, I guess, the more mainstream aspect that you might not be necessarily incorporating just as much AAC, for example, then, do you know, maybe one child writes one sentence about the book that they've just read, another writes 5 sentences if they're able to, another simply picks out the people who were involved in the story, another has to do a cut and stick activity and just order that the book came in, and all of that can be devised around absolutely one session alone.
Fantastic. And I think, so the last question I was going to ask you is, what kind of materials do you use in the classroom to support teaching? And you've kind of outlined quite a lot there just now. And it's good to see
quite a lot, haven't I?
Well, they do lead into each other, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, again, the list is endless in what you can use, and obviously, you know, what is very easily made by yourself as well. I'm a very creative person. I'm a resource girl. I love to make things. and source things that are so widely available and freely available as well. For example, I use a lot of the BookBug board books that get delivered out either to, your P1s, get them every single year. They get a set of board books. You can also request them through your health visitors as well. If you've got additional needs children or work with, you can request those directly from the Scottish Book Trust, for example. So there's no cost whatsoever there in terms of accessing those. There's loads of free downloadables as well in terms of inclusive technology for your pod book creation, your switch progression roadmaps, and there obviously is loads of training as well, from free right the way up to your full scale communication devices and programs, and the literally endless. I like the concrete. I like to be inventive, be creative, and use things that the kids are familiar with and the kids enjoy. Again, be guided by the child that you're working with, and you will get so much more back out of it, and the sheer enjoyment for that child will just be huge. I think ultimately, if it's not fun, then you won't get it back. So
that seems to be a recurring theme with all the people that I've interviewed from different educational backgrounds. One of the themes is they're trying to get away from doing paperwork and then sort of planning, this is what we're going to do in the day, to making it more like child-led and planning in the moment. The last 4 interviews, that's cropped up quite a lot. It's interesting.
Absolutely. And I think to be a good teacher, what in my mind is a good teacher is, yes, absolutely, someone who is organised, has a plan, has an approach, an attack that will meet all kids, but it's taking it that extra mile where on the spur of a moment or the drop of the hat that you can diverse off and you can run with it. If that is what's fed to you that they want to know or that they require at that point, it's being able to work on your feet and just think, right, I need to pull this out of the bag. What have I got up my sleeve that can sort of fit in there? And that, to me, a teacher who's responsive to what's being fed by her children is the best teacher in my eyes, 100%.
That's great. I would agree with that. Now, Jen, that's the last of my questions, but there may be something that you want to mention that you've not had a chance to with the questions that I've asked today. So
that was speedy. I didn't think that was too bad at all.
Well, you can go on for another half an hour if you would like to. I'm enjoying everything that I'm hearing, so I would love to hear anything else that you've got to share in the matter.
Oh goodness, no! I mean, I could literally go on forever talking about Makaton and communication and sensory awareness and the whole sort of side of it. I think that a way that's definitely becoming more apparent in the effectiveness that it has for children as well is the big sort of approach of alternative therapies, and really sort of drawing on the importance of those and valuing the sort of mental health of the child first, as opposed to necessarily ticking off curriculum for excellence milestones that really are not going to have any value for that child. And I think for me personally, it might go against the grain of what we have to fill out as teachers. But if my children are developing and they are flourishing, then it doesn't make a difference to me whether I'm ticking off a box on curriculum for excellence or not. And the way that I've found that to happen is by these sensory approaches, by, for example, brain gym activities, whether that's kids yoga, for example, or the story massage, as I've said, or the introduction of musical therapy, or your expressive arts fields. That has far much more value for me and success in the child. And you can incorporate elements of numeracy and elements of literacy and elements of science and, touch base on all of the curriculum as an outlier. But ultimately, for me, what can you do to benefit this child to live as independent a life as they possibly can? And is that getting them to count to 20 or know their 4 times table? Or is that helping them to zip up a jacket themselves or tie their shoelaces or be able to go up to the cafe without having a panic attack? That to me has much, much, much more value. And I don't feel that that's supported enough in terms of the curriculum makeup. and especially down to the level of some of the children, obviously on the more sort of severe complex radar, if you like. The curriculum for excellence milestones just don't accommodate, and I think that is something that massively needs addressed. So yeah, the teachers that fly under the radar, I guess, a little bit like me, and make the difference, I think, because I fully believe that I do make such a good difference, are those that sort of step outside the box.